Hi, my name is Chris Kelly, and for the next few moments I want to provide you some step-by-step instructions on how to prepare samples for crude fat extraction using ANKOM filter bag technology. Crude fat extraction requires the XT4 filter bag, which comes in boxes like this. The XT4 filter bag has a porosity of approximately 1 micron. Each filter bag must be numbered with your test number and a bag number. For the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to be using the ANKOM XT15, which allows us to do up to 15 crude fat extractions at a time. So we'll take each bag, and using a solvent-resistant marker, we'll mark it with the test number and bag number, bags number 1 through 15. We'll do this for all 15 bags. One of the benefits of filter bag technology for crude fat extraction is you can determine both dry matter or moisture value and crude fat at the same time. If you want to know the moisture value, you have to record the weight of the filter bag for each extraction. We use a LEMS program called Balance Talk, which provides us an interface between our balance and the computer. This allows us to eliminate the transposing error that sometimes happens when you manually record the weights. We simply put the bag on the analytical balance, make sure our cursor is in the right place on our spreadsheet, and then push print. This records the weight of the filter bag, and we can move on to the next one. For the purpose of this discussion, I'm weighing out each filter bag individually and then going back and weigh the samples. But use your normal good laboratory practices and what's best for you to weigh out the samples. For some people, it's weighing out the filter bag and the sample one at a time. When you're ready to weigh the sample, simply take your filter bag, put in the small weighing tin that comes with every instrument, holding the bag open. Zero the balance out, and weigh approximately 1 gram of sample into the filter bag. Of course, make sure your sample is good and homogeneous, because if the sample isn't, that's going to affect the precision of your results. I record the sample weight each time and move to the next. After you've weighed the sample and recorded the weight, heat seal it. For the XT4 filter bag, you'll require a higher heat setting on your heat sealer. In most cases, it's going to be somewhere between 4 to 6. You'll have to do some testing on your heat sealer at your setup to make sure it's the right heat setting. I place my hand behind the sealing bar in order to make sure that I don't put the bag too far through, because I want to seal the bag as close as possible to the top of the opening. I'm going to place the filter bag on there, push down the heating bar, the light will come on. When the light goes off, I'll hold it for another moment longer and then release. Make sure you have a strong sealing mark on that to indicate that it's sealed well. But if it's not, just do it again. If because the heat setting is too high, you find that the bag is sticking to the heat sealer, don't try to force it off. Simply weigh your next sample, and by the time you're done with that, the sealer will be cool enough for you to easily remove the bag. And then continue on to weigh all your samples. Again, remembering that if you want the moisture value, you're going to want to record the filter bag weight as well. If you don't need a moisture or dry matter value, you can eliminate that step and just weigh the sample into a tared filter bag. For samples that have oil content of greater than 15%, we recommend that you weigh the samples into a weigh tin. This will capture any oil that migrates out of the filter bag during the pre-dry step that we'll show you next. So for high-fat samples, we weigh the filter bag and record its weight. Number a tin to correspond with the filter bag number, and then weigh and record the weight of that tin. With that done, we'll put the filter bag in the bag holder, place it in the weighing tin, and zero it out on the analytical balance. Now we're ready to add our sample. Again, about 1 gram. 1 gram is what we use and what our procedure calls for, but you're really not limited to 1 gram. You're really limited to what the bag can hold. If you have a high weight sample, you might be able to put up to 3 grams in there. But as a general rule, 1 to 2 grams is pretty common. This is one where it's very important to make sure that you don't get sample on the edges of the filter bag, because if you do, you could cause yourself some problems with sealing. And we record the sample weight. Now we're ready to seal the filter bag. You'll notice because this is a sticky sample, I want to do everything I can to make sure that it doesn't come up into the sealing area. So I'll manipulate the bag a little bit and move the sample around as best I can so I can go to sealing. Now I'm going to marry the filter bag with the corresponding tin, and that's what's going to go in the oven for the pre-dry, along with the rest of the samples. Before we go to the pre-dry step, let me summarize the process thus far. For crude fat extraction using filter bag technology, you have the capability of getting a dry matter or moisture value at the same time. To do this, you must record the filter bag weight. You record the weight of the filter bag, tare the balance, and then weigh anywhere from 1 to 3 grams of sample, depending on what the filter bag will hold. After you heat seal the bag, you're ready to go on to the next. Since we're talking about the XT15, you can weigh and record up to 15 sample types in a single analysis. For samples with oil content of greater than 15%, it is necessary that you include a weigh tin in the process. You do this in order to capture any oil that is lost during the pre-dry step. You again weigh the filter bag if you want to have the moisture content determined. Weigh a corresponding tin and record that weight. Weigh the sample into the bag, and then marry the sample and the weigh tin together for the pre-dry step. Now let's go to the next step in the process. With the filter bag method, it is necessary to pre-dry the samples. That's because we're determining fat indirectly. In other words, we're removing the oil from the sample, weighing the sample back to determine the oil that was lost. Take your samples and place them on a tray that you can put in an oven. The oven should be at about 102 to 105 degrees. Our procedure calls for you to pre-dry the samples for up to 3 hours. The drying time may vary depending on your sample types, but our procedure calls for a 3-hour pre-dry to make sure that all the moisture is removed before you do the crude fat extraction. When the drying time is complete, we take the samples out of the oven and place them directly into a moisture stop weigh pouch. Gently push the air out of the bag, seal the bag, and then let it sit until it cools down to ambient temperature, normally about 10 minutes. This is important. At this part of the procedure, we do not want the samples, especially samples that might be oily on the outside, to touch each other. Samples that have less than 15 or 20% normally won't be a problem. They can be side by side and there's not going to be any migration. But that sample that had greater than 20%, especially if we see oil in the bottom of the tin, that's a sample that we don't want to touch other bags. Once you've taken the weight after the pre-dry, they can mix and match, there'll be no problem. But at this point, be very careful to make sure that fat doesn't migrate from one bag to another. After you've given time for the samples and filter bags to cool down, you'll record the pre-dried weight. Now note, for the sample that has a weigh tin, I weigh it all together. The formula in our spreadsheet will account for the weigh tin's weight and will determine any oil that was lost during the pre-dry step. Note also that I kept my hand on the desiccant pouch. What I want to do is make sure no more air can go in. If I was using a desiccant cabinet, every time I remove the lid, I'm allowing a large exchange of air. With a Moisture Stop weigh pouch, or a pouch that you make yourself, that doesn't happen. Once you've captured the weights from the pre-dry, you're ready to go to the extraction phase. At this point, it doesn't matter if the bags touch each other, because you've captured all the weights necessary before the extraction. With the pre-dried samples, I'm now ready to do a crude fat extraction, and I simply follow the instructions on the screen. It tells me to remove or insert the samples. So I open up the vessel, take out a sample carrier that's inside the insert, and place my pre-dried samples inside. I can place up to 15 samples at a time. With the samples in their holder, I place them into the insert and then follow the instructions on the screen. I've inserted the samples, so now I press enter. It tells me to select the time. Most samples can be extracted in less than 30 minutes, so I'll select 30 minutes. And I press enter. It tells me to close the vessel and press start. With this, the solvent is automatically added to the system, heated up, the extraction takes place, and the full extraction is done over a 30-minute time. When the process is complete, we simply remove the samples to take them to the final post-dry. I take the samples that have been extracted in the XT15, place them on a tray, and put them in that same oven, 102 to 105 degrees, for about 15 minutes. After the short post-dry, we take the samples out of the oven and place them directly into a Moisture Stop weigh pouch. We place the samples in the Moisture Stop weigh pouch, push the air out, seal the bag. We let the samples cool until they reach ambient temperature, normally about 10 minutes, and then we're ready to reweigh. Once the bags have reached ambient temperature, we're ready to do the final weight. With one hand over the Moisture Stop weigh pouch to keep air from getting in, we reach in and take one bag out at a time and record its weight. And that's all there is to it. The spreadsheets that we provide with each instrument does all the calculations. You just enter the different weights and the fat determination is made. Remember to look at your manual where the procedures are there specifically. All the details on the weights you have to catch, the variances, all the details are provided for you. I hope you found this video helpful. And remember to refer to it any time you need a reminder on how to do each one of the steps. Thank you for choosing ANKOM products.